I was 20 minutes into packing my winter scarves when I heard my daughter-in-law whisper, "She won't notice. We'll tell her it's for her own good." People think old age dulls your hearing, but it only sharpens the parts you need to survive. My name is Mary, and the day my son moved my kettle to the top shelf, "So you don't hurt your back, Mom," I understood there are softer ways to take something from a woman than by force. Daniel promised me after my husband died that I would never be alone. "You cooked for me when I was small. I'll cook for you when you're old," he said, his eyes shining like they did when he was 10, and brought me dandelions in a chipped mug. He meant it then. I know he did. But meaning and memory are two different kinds of light, and somewhere between his long work hours and the steady tapping of Melissa's nails on her phone, that promise faded like a grocery list caught in the rain. I had lived in the same little house for 42 years, the one with the rose bush that refused to die no matter how many winters tried it. Every corner smelled like something I had saved: lavender in the linen cupboard, cinnamon in the baking tins, pencil shavings in Henry's old desk. Daniel said the stairs were getting too steep for me, which was true, but I climbed them like a ship's ladder, hand over hand, because there are some distances you don't measure in steps. You measure them in memories. He and Melissa offered the downstairs bedroom in their new house, the one with the sliding doors that opened to a square of grass trimmed so sharp it looked like a photograph. "It'll be temporary," Melissa said with a smile that bounced right off the glass, "just until we figure out the best care." She used the word "we" the way people use tongs to keep their fingers clean. I told myself to be grateful. A widow shouldn't be too proud when help is offered. But the first morning I woke there, the coffee smelled like vanilla syrup, and the milk came from a carton shaped like a science project, and I stood very still because everything was new, and new things can make you feel like a guest in your own days. Melissa had arranged the bathroom like a hotel, rolled towels, labeled containers, a mat that felt like walking on bread. On my toothbrush, she had stuck a little gold sticker that said Mary in tidy letters, as if I might forget. She called me Ma when Daniel was around, and Mary when he wasn't. It was a small thing, but small things have teeth. I tried to make myself useful. I folded laundry quietly, learned which drawer held the spatulas with holes and which held the ones without, watered the basil on the windowsill, even though Melissa told me it was hydroponic and didn't like old-fashioned water. When Daniel came home late, I'd fix him a plate and ask about his day, and he'd talk about contracts and clients and burn rate, until I nodded like I understood, because the language of my youth was casseroles and church fairs, and his is synergy and runway and Series B. At night, I'd hear them through the wall, her saying, "We need space," and him saying, "She's my mother," and then nothing but the sound of two people lying on their backs, staring into a future that didn't fit both of us. I caught Melissa more than once moving my things slightly further from the center of rooms, as if my presence had edges she wanted to sand down. The rocking chair I'd brought, the one Henry varnished the summer Daniel was born, migrated from the living room to the hallway, then to the spare room, then temporarily to the garage so the Christmas boxes could be easier to reach, though it was only September. My cookie tin disappeared altogether. When I asked, Melissa said, "We're watching our sugar," and smiled like a lid snapping shut. One afternoon when Daniel was at work, I heard Melissa on the phone in the kitchen, voice pitched bright and brittle. "Well, the equity's just sitting there," she said, and the word equity hung in the air like a cold draft. "If we liquidate now, we can cover the second mortgage and finally breathe." She was quiet, then laughed, a small cough of a laugh. "No, She won't mind. She'll be happier somewhere with activities. There are many kinds of silence. The one that followed felt like the moment before a teacup shatters. That evening, she placed a brochure by my cup of chamomile. My friend's mom loved this place, she said. The cover showed a woman with hair the color of snow that had never known slush, smiling up at a man in a polo shirt who handed her a ball of yarn as if it were a bouquet. They have art classes, book clubs, a nutrition plan, and 24-hour support. It's so safe. Safe is another word people use when they mean not here. I turned the pages. Everything was beige and cheerful and smelled like nothing. It's just information, Melissa added, but her hand hovered near the brochure, ready to reclaim it if I bled on it. I thanked her and took it to my room, set it on the dresser next to Henry's photograph, and waited for my heart to stop sounding like a knock at the door. When Daniel came in later, he sat on the edge of my bed, the way he did when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. "Mom," he began, and I knew the rest. I could have spared him and said it for him. Your back, the stairs, the risk, the word fall, shaped into a warning that doubles as a plan. Instead, I placed my hand on his, the one with the faint scar from when he cut himself opening a tin of peaches at 13 because he wanted to make me a surprise dessert. "I know you want me safe," I said. "I know you have a lot on your plate." He nodded. "Melissa worries," he said, and it was the gentlest betrayal I've ever heard. I made him tea, and we spoke of logistics in a hush, waiting lists, assessments, finances. He looked relieved when I didn't cry. He didn't notice that relief has the same weight as permission. In the days that followed, the house adjusted around me. My slippers found new homes under sofas I didn't sit on. The basil thrived. Melissa started a donate box and asked if I'd like to contribute any duplicates. I don't own duplicates. I own memories that do the same job differently. Still, I gave her the second set of measuring cups Henry bought when he thought we'd bake together after retirement. We never used them. He died that spring. I let them go to prove I could. The brochure returned to the kitchen counter, then to my pillow, then appeared in a neat little stand on the hallway table, as if we were hosting an open house for my future. On Thursday, Melissa mentioned a tour. "Just to see," she said, and her voice had that thin sweetness you taste in tea when someone has stirred it too long. "They have a room with a garden view." "Do gardens let you pick the roses?" I asked. She blinked at me, confused. "They trim them routinely," she said. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen for water and saw a light under the door to Melissa's home office. I stood there with my throat burning and my old robe slipping off one shoulder and listened. There was the murmur of her voice, flatter than when she spoke to us, and the staccato of typing. I stepped closer to adjust the draft stopper and caught a fragment through the gap. "Estate sale. Yes, contents of single-family home, mostly mid-century. Pick up next week." She paused, then added in a soft, practical tone that had no room for me at all. "Owner transitioning to long-term care." My hand tightened on the glass until the rim clicked against my teeth. I had not yet said yes. I had not yet seen the garden view. But somewhere without me, my life was already being priced, tagged, and scheduled, and in that quiet, clean house, with its basil and labeled towels and hydroponic rules, something old and stubborn in me, older than the rose bush, older than the stairs, lifted its head. Melissa said the tour would be fun, which is a word people use when they want you to give up something without making a scene. She wore her meeting earrings and a blazer the color of milk foam, and she walked a half step ahead of me as if she were pulling a polite train. Daniel carried my purse, even though I said I could manage. He does that when he feels guilty, gives his hands a job so his heart won't have to do one. In the car, he turned the radio down and asked if the seat was warm enough and if the belt rubbed my collarbone, and I said I was fine, because mothers teach their sons how to be men, and sometimes, by accident, how to be cowards. The building stood behind a row of ornamental trees whose leaves were so glossy they looked laminated. A woman with hair arranged like a question mark greeted us at the door and said her name so quickly I only caught the shape of it. She smelled faintly of lilacs and antiseptic. "This is a community," she said, leaning on the word as if it had pillars. "We prioritize autonomy and dignity." Another polished word, dignity, the kind you can put on a brochure and tuck in a drawer. We passed a sunny room where 5 residents sat in a circle doing chair yoga, while a man with a headset counted to 8 with a smile that didn't crack once. A television in the corner played a slideshow of grandchildren, stock images, all of them, teeth so white they looked imaginary, sunsets that had never smelled like seaweed. My shoes whispered on the waxed floor. Melissa asked about medication management with the crisp curiosity of someone pricing tomatoes. Daniel asked about nights. Who checks in? What if someone gets confused? How quickly does help come? I watched his face soften with every answer. He needs structure, like a man needs sleep. The director led us to a model suite. It had a window staged with a plant that would never die because it had never been alive. The bed was narrower than the one I shared with Henry, but not so narrow that memory would stop trying to lie down beside me. They had made a little seating area with 2 chairs facing each other, like a conversation waiting to happen. On the desk sat a journal, open to a page where a neat, invented hand had written, "Grateful for this new chapter." I closed it. I don't like lies that try to be kind. "You'd have your own bathroom," the director said, as if possession were the same as privacy. The towel was rolled like a sweet bun and cinched with a ribbon. I untied it, let the towel fall into an ordinary rectangle, and felt better. We toured the art room, shelves of paints that had never been pried open by old, stiff fingers, a kiln that smelled like electricity, a bulletin board announcing poetry night in bubbly letters as if grief could be coaxed to rhyme on Thursdays. We toured the dining room, tables set with cutlery that made a little chime when the director adjusted it. A menu printed in a font that tried to be friendly. A bowl of fruit, shiny as theater props. "Do you like salmon, Mary?" the director asked. "I like it when someone bothers to salt it," I said. And Melissa laughed, a short silver sound, surprised that I had edges. In the hallway, a woman in a floral sweater touched my elbow. Her eyes were the pale blue of laundry day. "You knew?" she asked, hopeful and afraid in equal measure. "Just looking," I said. "Don't look too long," she whispered, glancing at the director. "You get used to the wrong things." Then she patted my arm twice and drifted away, leaving the faintest scent of soap and lemon polish. On the drive back, no one turned the radio on. Silence sat between us, wearing Melissa's perfume. When we got home, she put the brochures in a neat stack by the fruit bowl and checked something off on her phone. Daniel kissed my forehead and went back to his laptop life. I stood in the doorway of my room and stared at the quilt I had pieced from Henry's old shirts, checks and stripes, and one absurd floral he bought in '87, because the salesman told him he looked like a movie star. I ran my hand over the squares, the familiar pathways my fingers know better than prayer. I could feel a plan forming in me like yeast, quiet but certain. The next morning, I left early, a cardigan over my dress, the brooch Henry gave me pinned where it always is, near the second button, like a small eye that never closes. Melissa had a Pilates class, and Daniel had a call with someone in a time zone where people were always awake. I took the bus. I still have the card from my old life in my old house, and it beeped as if greeting me by name. The driver didn't ask questions. I watched the city unspool, men in work boots carrying coffees that steam like horses, girls with backpacks big as promises, a boy riding a scooter one-footed, reckless and perfect. The street where my house lives has not learned new tricks. The rosebush was doing its stubborn best, throwing up 2 lopsided blooms as if to embarrass the fall. I have a spare key tucked under the 3rd brick from the left because the first 2 learned to betray me years ago in winter. The lock stuck, then yielded the way old friends do. Inside, the air was thin and dusty, like an unopened book. The light fell differently than in my memory, but the rooms remembered my feet. On the kitchen counter lay a stack of colored stickers and a roll of twine. Beside them, a neat clipboard held a form, estate sale, itemized. The handwriting was Melissa's tidy soldier print, straighter than a sermon. She had already assigned numbers to my life. 14, rocking chair, garage. 26, blue mixing bowl, cupboard top. 31, wedding china, dining room hutch. 47, Mary's brooches, bedroom dresser, top drawer. I touched that last line and felt suddenly naked. The brooch near my second button glinted, defiant. I put the clipboard down and began to walk. My fingers ran over the lip of the blue mixing bowl, cool as lake water. I opened the hutch and saw the plates with their tiny green ivy pattern, some chipped, because life is busy and hands shake. In the bedroom, the mirror tilted its old truth toward me. I am smaller than I was, yes, but more concentrated. Grief reduces like a sauce. I pulled the bottom drawer, and there, tucked under a scarf that had held my hair while I painted the porch in 1991, lay the shoebox I had not thought of in years. Inside were letters, Henry's from the army, my mother's recipes in her looping fog of a hand, Daniel's pictures of dragons and rocket ships and a house with a door that was always open. Under those, taped to the cardboard, a folded paper with a bank's letterhead. I lifted it with the care you give a moth. It was the deed addendum, the one Henry insisted on after his cousin lost everything to a second wife's son. He had wanted to spare me from any future I hadn't chosen. There, in black and unfriendly ink, were the words that mattered. Life estate reserved to Mary Collins, remainder to Daniel Collins, transferable only upon death of life tenant or voluntary release by same. The signatures were ours. The witness was the notary who cried at our wedding because Henry stepped on my veil by accident, and we both laughed. I had forgotten this because life carries you like a tide, and sometimes memory drops things it means to keep. With the paper in my handbag, I walked the rooms again, calmer now. I found the little brass key to the old writing desk, the desk I had given to Daniel when he moved to his first apartment, the one Melissa called Grandma Brown. I slid the key into the lock and turned. The drawer opened to the cedar smell of an earlier version of me. In the back corner lay the ledger where I had kept notes after Henry died. Dates and repairs and names of people who helped when I couldn't reach the top shelf of grief. On the last page, written on a day I must have felt far away from myself, I had copied the lawyer's number and underlined it twice. I traced the lines with my finger until the ink might as well have been today. There was a sound in the hallway. Boots, purposeful, a man's voice saying, "We can start in the living room," and another answering, "Make it quick, photos at 3. My heartbeat clenched once, then steadied. The estate sale company was early, or perhaps Melissa had scheduled them without telling me, as one might book a haircut for a child who resists bangs. I tucked the deed addendum deeper into my bag, smoothed my cardigan, and stepped into the hallway as two men in matching shirts, the color of wet cardboard, rounded the corner. They stopped, surprised, mouths half open, like commas waiting for meaning. "Good morning," I said, the voice I used when Daniel's friends stayed over and tracked in half the neighborhood on their sneakers. "You're in the wrong house." One of them, young enough to have a haircut with opinions, glanced at his clipboard. Estate sale? Collins property?" "The living Collins is currently in residence," I said, and watched the phrase confuse him. The older one scratched his neck. "Ma'am, we were told—" "You were told a story," I said. "Let me tell you another. This house is not for picking like a carcass. Not today." I stepped past them, opened the front door, and pointed at the brass numbers I polished every spring. "Do these look like surrender to you?" The younger man flushed. "We can call the client." "Do that," I said. "And while you're at it, tell her to bring my cookie tin." He blinked. "What?" "She'll know," I said, then added, "because this is how you throw a small, sharp thing where it will land true, and tell her to bring a lawyer. I've brought mine." I hadn't, yet. But I had a phone, a number underlined twice, and a piece of paper that put steel in my spine. The men retreated to the porch to make their call. I stood in my kitchen, in my life, with the rosebush tapping the window like a patient friend, and felt the old stubborn thing in me become a flame you could warm your hands over. When my phone buzzed with Daniel's name, I answered. "Mom," he said, breathless, "what's going on?" "Melissa says the movers—" "Not movers," I said softly. "Vultures. Come home, Daniel." There was a pause where I could hear him choosing between the language of contracts and the language of sons. "I'm on my way," he said, and for the first time in weeks, his voice sounded like dandelions in a chipped mug. Daniel arrived before the estate men could make up their minds. I heard his car crunch into the gravel, the slam of a door, the hurried rhythm of his shoes against the walkway. He came in like a boy who had run home from school, breathless, jacket askew. For 1 second, when his eyes found mine in the hallway, I saw the same look he wore the day he scraped his knee and came running for my comfort, a mixture of pain and hope that I could make it right. The two men in their cardboard-colored shirts looked almost relieved to see him. "Sir," the older one said, "there's been a misunderstanding. We were told the property was being cleared for sale." Daniel's gaze flicked from them to me, then back again. "This house isn't for sale," he said. His voice cracked a little on the word "isn't," and it reminded me that conviction is heavy when you've been carrying too much compromise. Melissa's car pulled up not long after, smooth as a cat on the prowl. She stepped out slowly, heels precise, as though she were arriving at a board meeting rather than the home she had tried to auction off piece by piece. She didn't expect me to be standing there with my cardigan buttoned, my handbag in my grip, and my spine straighter than it had been in years. Her smile faltered, then recovered, thin as tracing paper. "Mary," she said. "No Ma, just Mary. I was going to explain everything. You shouldn't have come alone. It's not safe in this old place." Safe. Again that word, polished until it lost all shape. "I came because it's still mine," I said. I reached into my bag and drew out the folded paper with Henry's signature, with my name written in ink that had outlived him. I laid it flat on the hall table so that everyone could see the truth, black on white. Life estate, I read aloud, my finger pressing the words. Reserved to Mary Collins. The estate men shifted uneasily. One of them coughed and said, "We'll, be on our way, ma'am." And they slipped out, like boys caught with their hands in a jar that wasn't theirs. Melissa's face colored, blotches blooming under her makeup. "You don't understand the financial strain we're under. The mortgage, the second loan, This house is not yours to solve your debts with," I interrupted. My voice startled me, low, steady, the kind of tone I used when Daniel was little and tried to run into the street without looking. "This house holds my life, and it will not be tagged, priced, and sold while I breathe in it." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Melissa, you didn't tell me you'd scheduled the sale already." "I was trying to protect you," she snapped. "We need space, Daniel. We need freedom. Your mother needs care we can't provide. Care doesn't begin with theft," I said. The room hung heavy with silence. Even the old clock on the mantel seemed to wait before daring to tick again. Daniel's eyes darted between us, torn as if each word were tugging at him from a different shore. Finally, he looked at Melissa. "You should go wait in the car." She stared at him, disbelief twisting her mouth. "You're choosing her over me?" "I'm asking you to leave the room before I say something I can't take back," he said. His voice was firmer now, no crack in it. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, the sound of her heels like nails being driven into wood. When the door closed, Daniel slumped into the rocking chair, my chair, rescued from exile in the garage, and dropped his head into his hands. I saw the boy and the man fuse together in that posture of defeat. "I wanted to take care of you, Mom," he whispered. "I promised. I didn't think it would turn into this war." I sat across from him, resting my hand on the arm of the chair. "You're still keeping your promise," I said softly. "Taking care of me doesn't mean making me disappear. It means seeing me, even when others don't want to." He lifted his head, eyes shining in a way that reminded me of dandelions in chipped mugs. "What do I do now?" That was the moment I realized the battle had only begun. Melissa was not a woman who gave up ground quietly, and I was not yet finished defending the life Henry and I had built brick by stubborn brick. I folded the deed back into my bag, patted Daniel's hand, and looked him straight in the eye. "Now," I said, "we prepare for the storm she's about to bring." Melissa did not stay away for long. By the weekend, she had polished her anger into something smooth and brittle, like glass you could cut yourself on without realizing. I heard the car outside before I saw her, the sound of the engine lingering, as if even the machine were reluctant to bring her back here. Daniel had gone to pick up groceries, his way of delaying the inevitable, and I was left at the kitchen table with my cup of tea cooling beside me when she stepped in. "Mary," she said, her voice clipped, careful. "We need to talk." I didn't offer her tea. The kettle hissed on the stove, but I let it hiss until it fell silent. She sat across from me, posture sharp, her handbag placed neatly on the table between us like a shield. "What happened the other day was premature," she began. "The estate sale, the movers, there was miscommunication. My fault, perhaps, but the fact remains, this arrangement can't continue. We don't have the space, the resources, or the energy." I studied her face. She had powdered her skin too pale, and under the powder her jaw twitched. She was young enough to think planning could fix everything, old enough to be dangerous when cornered. "Your problem, Melissa," I said evenly, "is that you mistake inconvenience for burden. I know the difference." Her lips pressed into a thin line. I'm not your enemy, but you have to see reality. Daniel works 12 hours a day. I manage the household. We can't keep rearranging our lives around you. The house needs to go. The value in it belongs to me until I no longer draw breath, I interrupted. My hand rested on my bag, the deed inside like a heartbeat I could feel through the fabric. You cannot sell what isn't yours. Her eyes narrowed, glittering like chips of broken mirror. You think a piece of paper will stop me? No, I said. I think my will to remain is stronger than yours to erase me. For a moment, her facade cracked. The truth spilled out of her expression before she could cage it. She wanted me gone, not for practicality, but for conquest. I was the shadow she couldn't sweep from her perfect white walls, the wrinkle in her smooth life plan. When Daniel returned, he found us sitting there like statues, the air between us buzzing with unsaid words. He tried to diffuse it. Let's all calm down. Let's eat first. But the tension clung to him too. He set the groceries down too hard, a jar of pickles clinking against the counter. That evening, I retreated to my room, but I could hear them in theirs. Melissa's voice, sharp. She's manipulating you. She'll never let go of that house. You'll be tied to her forever. Daniel's voice, low, breaking. She's my mother. Don't make me choose. Silence, then Melissa's bitter laugh, and the sound of a door closing too hard. I lay awake, staring at the quilt patched from Henry's shirts. My fingers traced the stitches until they ached. Memories unspooled. Henry on the porch, hammer in hand, the smell of sawdust. Daniel at 5, his cheeks sticky with jam, arms wrapped around my neck. These walls had absorbed every moment of my life. The thought of leaving them not by choice but by force set a fire low in my chest. The next day I called the lawyer. His voice was older, slower, but still steady. Mrs. Collins, he said, I remember drafting that deed. You're secure, legally speaking. But security on paper is not the same as peace in a family. Do you want me to step in? I hesitated. To bring the law into blood is to turn water to stone. It never flows back the same. Not yet, I said, but I may. In the afternoon, I walked the garden. The rosebush had pushed out 3 more blooms, defiant against the creeping chill of autumn. I clipped one, pressed it to my lips, and whispered, still here. Melissa avoided me for a time after that, but her avoidance was not surrender. She began small campaigns, moving my chair again, hiding my slippers, insisting I had misplaced them. She replaced my teacups with sleek white mugs, packed my old ones into a box without asking. Daniel noticed, I could tell, but he was caught in the middle, his guilt gnawing at him until he was hollow-eyed. One evening I heard her on the phone again. She spoke softly, but I caught fragments. Facility, transfer, evaluation, sooner rather than later. My blood turned cold. She was planning again, circling, waiting for the moment my defenses weakened. But I was not weakened. The paper in my bag, the memories stitched into my quilt, the stubborn bloom of my rose bush, they were my armor. I knew then that the storm I had warned Daniel about was here. It would not come in the form of strangers with clipboards, but in the slow erosion of trust inside these walls. And I would have to decide to fight with law and fury or to fight with patience and truth. Either way, I could not, would not, vanish quietly. Melissa's next move came dressed in politeness, which is the most dangerous disguise cruelty can wear. A week after our kitchen confrontation, she appeared in my doorway, holding a clipboard and a pen, her smile stretched too tight. "Mary," she said, voice honeyed, "there are some forms we need to update, medical information, emergency contacts, little things like that. It's for your safety." She always reached for that word, safety, like a shield she thought could blind me. I motioned for her to leave the papers on the dresser. She hesitated, then placed them neatly beside Henry's photograph, the one where he was squinting into the sun, laughing at something I had said. When she left, I opened the packet. At first glance, they seemed ordinary: medication history, allergies, insurance. But tucked among them was a release of rights, written in legal phrasing meant to look harmless: consent to transfer residence to long-term care facility, authority granted to next of kin for property management. My hand trembled, but not from age. It was fury that made my fingers shake. She wanted my signature, my surrender, dressed up as paperwork for my protection. I slipped the forms back into the folder, tucked it under my arm, and went straight to Daniel. He was in the living room, his laptop balanced on his knees, eyes glazed with exhaustion. "Daniel," I said, setting the folder on the coffee table, "read." He frowned but obeyed. As his eyes scanned the page, the color drained from his face. "Melissa said," he began. "Don't finish that sentence," I cut in. "Read what it says, not what she said." He closed the folder slowly, shame pulling at his shoulders. "I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the trouble," I said. "You never know until it's too late." That evening they fought. I could hear every word through the thin walls. Melissa's voice, sharp and cold. "She's poisoning you against me. Don't you see? She's manipulating you." Daniel's reply was weary, strained. "No, Melissa, you're the one who tried to trick her. You put legal documents in front of her like she wouldn't notice." "She isn't supposed to be here forever," Melissa snapped. "I married you, not your mother. And I made a promise to her," Daniel shot back. "A promise I intend to keep." Silence followed, thick and brutal. Then the sound of a door closing, this time hers. I sat on my bed, quilt around my shoulders, and let the tears come. Not for myself, I was stronger than they knew, but for my son, caught in a war he never asked for. I wanted to hold him like when he was small, when his fears were of monsters under the bed and not the woman who shared it. The next morning, Melissa was gone before sunrise. Daniel told me she'd gone to stay with her sister for a while. His eyes looked hollow, like something precious had been scooped out. "I don't want to lose her, Mom," he confessed. "But I don't want to lose you either." "You won't lose me," I said softly, "unless you let her take me." He nodded, but I saw the storm still raging in him. Later that day, I returned to my old house. I walked from room to room, touching each surface like a priest blessing an altar. The rosebush outside had dropped its petals, but the stem stood proud, ready to bloom again come spring. I pressed my hand against the wall of the kitchen, remembering Henry's laughter, Daniel's small fingers sticky with jam, the warmth of a home built not from money, but from love and sacrifice. This house was my fortress. Melissa's schemes could not uproot what was rooted in memory, in soil watered by years of devotion. But I also knew she was not done. Her silence was not surrender. It was strategy. She would return, sharper than before, perhaps armed with lawyers, perhaps with words designed to wound. I folded the deed addendum back into my bag, kissed Henry's photograph, and whispered, "I'm ready." Because sometimes survival is not about hiding from the storm, but about standing so firmly that the storm breaks around you, and I would stand. Melissa's return was not with heels clicking on the floor or clipped words in the kitchen. It came in the stiff fold of an envelope slid under Daniel's door one rainy Thursday morning. I was pouring tea when I heard him mutter a curse, low and broken, the kind of word a son doesn't like his mother to hear. He sat at the table, shoulders hunched, staring at the letter as though it might leap up and bite him. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, then pushed the paper toward me. The letterhead was sharp, black ink, a law firm's crest embossed at the top. I didn't need glasses to feel the weight of it. Melissa's name was there, neat and bold. Petition for guardianship. Guardianship. The word sank like a stone in my chest. It meant she had gone from whispers and tricks to the full cruelty of legality. The letter claimed I was incapable of managing my affairs, that my health was declining, that my memory was failing. It listed incidents, imagined falls, misplaced items, supposed confusion, lies, each one sewn together to make a costume of incompetence. My hands trembled, not with weakness, but with rage. "She wants to declare me unfit," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my blood. "She wants control of me and of this house." Daniel's face was pale, jaw tight. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know. She filed this without telling me. His voice broke. "She's using the law against you." I laid my hand over his. "Against us, Daniel. Don't you see? This is not just me she's trying to erase. It's your promise, your father's memory, our life. She wants it all gone." That evening, I sat in my room with Henry's photograph, staring into his crinkled smile. I could almost hear his voice. "Stand firm, Mary. Don't let them take what we built." The deed in my bag felt heavier than ever, like a shield forged decades before for this very battle. The next morning, I dressed carefully. My dark wool skirt, a pressed blouse, the brooch Henry gave me, gleaming at the collar. I called the lawyer whose number I had underlined years ago. His voice was calm, steady, like stone beneath rushing water. "Mrs. Collins, if she thinks she can win guardianship without proof, she underestimates the law, and you will contest it. You have every right to stand." When I hung up, I felt lighter, not safe, not yet, but armed. Melissa, however, was not done playing her part. She arrived that afternoon with a smile stretched thin as paper. Daniel opened the door, but I stepped forward, blocking her path. "You've involved lawyers," I said before she could speak. Her eyes flickered just for a second. "It's for your well-being, Mary. You need proper care, and Daniel can't do this forever. I'm only thinking of what's best." "What's best," I said, "does not begin with lies." Her tone sharpened. "Do you deny you've misplaced things? That you've had trouble with stairs? That you forget dates?" "I deny that living a long life is the same as being unfit for it," I shot back. "And I deny you the right to decide what I can or cannot do." Daniel stood between us, torn in two. "Melissa, please." But she turned on him, her voice rising. "Don't you see? She's manipulating you. She'll cling to this house until it ruins us. You'll never have a life of your own." His face twisted in pain, the same expression I saw when he was little, and two friends fought in front of him, both demanding he choose. He looked at me, then at her, words stuck in his throat. "Daniel," I said quietly, "look at me. Do I seem incapable to you?" He swallowed hard, his eyes wet. "No, Mom." Melissa's eyes blazed. "Then you're blind," she hissed, and stormed out, the door rattling in her wake. That night, Daniel sat in my room, his hands clasped like a boy at confession. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "You don't have to fix it," I told him. "You just have to stand beside me. The rest, I'll handle." In the quiet that followed, I felt the weight of generations in my chest. I thought of my mother, who sewed by candlelight to feed us. I thought of Henry, hammer in hand, building shelves in this very house. I thought of myself, young and tired, rocking Daniel in the chair now banished to the garage. We had all fought in our ways. Now it was my turn. I lay awake long after Daniel left, listening to the old clock tick. Each second was a heartbeat, a reminder. I was still here, still strong, still mine. Melissa might bring the law, might twist words and paper, but she would never take the marrow of who I was. The storm had arrived full force, and I would not bend. The courthouse smelled of polish and paper, the kind of smell that clings to rooms where lives are decided in neat stacks of files. Daniel walked beside me, stiff in his suit, his jaw working as though each step ground something heavy between his teeth. I wore my best navy dress, the one I had saved for Henry's retirement party all those years ago. My brooch glinted at my collar, my small armor, and I carried the deed in my handbag like a talisman. Melissa was already there. She stood near the double doors, her lawyer at her side, a man with glasses so thin they looked like threads of wire. She wore pale blue, her hair swept into a knot, her face calm, practiced. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted when they found me quick and sharp, as though she hadn't expected me to walk in on my own 2 feet. The bailiff called the case, in re-guardianship of Mary Collins. The words rang in my ears like a false hymn. I sat down at the table with my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, who smelled faintly of peppermint and ink. He placed a steadying hand on the folder between us. "Remember, Mary," he whispered, "the truth is your strength." The judge entered, robes brushing the floor, and we all rose. His face was weathered but not unkind, and when he looked at me, his gaze lingered, as if to measure the weight of my presence. Melissa's lawyer began. He painted me as frail, confused, incapable of managing daily affairs. He spoke of incidents, of risks, of falls that had never happened. He held up photographs of staircases and statistics about elderly injuries, words meant to make me vanish into a category rather than stand as a person. Melissa sat at his side, her expression arranged into pity, as though she were mourning me while I still breathed. When it was our turn, Mr. Patterson rose. He was not loud, but he was steady. He presented the deed addendum, my life estate carved into law by Henry's foresight. He spoke of my independence, my clarity, my ability to handle my affairs. Then he called me to the stand. I walked with purpose, every step a declaration. When I sat, I folded my hands and met the judge's eyes. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," I answered. "My daughter-in-law believes I am incapable of living my life. She is mistaken." The lawyer approached with questions sharpened like knives. "Mrs. Collins, do you sometimes forget where you've placed things?" "On occasion," I replied, "as does every person with more than 2 pockets." "Do you find stairs difficult?" "Yes," I said plainly, "and yet I climb them. Difficulty is not incapacity." He tried again. "Have you ever misplaced important documents?" I reached into my bag, drew out the deed, and held it up. "On the contrary, I have preserved the most important one of all, the the courtroom murmured. Melissa's jaw tightened. Then it was Daniel's turn. My son, my boy, stood and raised his hand to swear the oath. His voice trembled at first, but steadied as he spoke. He told the judge I managed my affairs, that I cooked, cleaned, and paid my own bills. He told him I remembered details from his childhood that even he had forgotten, how I reminded him of the scar on his wrist from the peaches tin, how I recalled every date of every loan payment Henry and I made on the house. He said simply, "She is my mother. She is strong. She is not unfit." Melissa's face flushed crimson. She leaned to her lawyer, whispering furiously, but her control was slipping. When the judge asked if she wished to speak, she rose with false calm. "Your Honor, this isn't about malice. It's about safety. Mary refuses to accept her limitations. I only want what's best." I stood then, though I had not been asked. "With respect, Judge," I said, "what Melissa wants is not what's best. What she wants is what's easiest for her. There is a difference." My voice did not waver. I raised my son in that house. I buried my husband after 42 years of love in that house. I wake every morning with memories stitched into those walls. That home is not a burden. It is my life, and I am not done living it. Silence filled the courtroom. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. The judge leaned forward, hands folded. "Mrs. Collins," he said gently, "you have made yourself clear. I see no grounds to strip you of your autonomy. Petition denied." The gavel struck, sharp and final. The sound rang like church bells in my chest. Melissa stood frozen, fury barely contained beneath her practiced face. Her lawyer shuffled papers, avoiding her eyes. Daniel reached for my hand, his grip warm, trembling. "You did it, Mom," he whispered. "No," I said, squeezing back. "We did." As we left the courthouse, the sky broke open with a cold autumn rain. But I lifted my face to it, unafraid, because sometimes even storms can feel like blessings when you have weathered worse. Still, I knew Melissa would not let go so easily. A woman like her doesn't vanish after defeat. She coils, she waits, she plans anew. But I had stood in the heart of her storm and not bent. And that knowledge was enough to keep me steady. For now. When Melissa lost in court, she didn't disappear. She retreated, like a fox slipping back into the brush. But her silence was not surrender. For 2 weeks, the house was strangely calm. She avoided me, avoided even Daniel, moving through rooms like a shadow with no sound. I might have been tempted to believe she had given up, but I knew better. A woman like her doesn't forgive humiliation, and the courtroom had been her humiliation. The first sign came in whispers. Neighbors I had known for decades, people who once shared coffee at my kitchen table, began to look at me with pity in their eyes. At the market, Mrs. Henderson asked if I was managing okay all alone, though I had been living with Daniel all along. Another neighbor, Mr. Price, asked gently if I had enough food, as though I were starving. These questions spread like frost, seeping into every conversation. Melissa was talking, not openly, not boldly, but carefully. She was laying down her version of me in other people's minds, fragile, forgetful, stubborn, a burden. And gossip is a more dangerous poison than law because it seeps quietly, and once it takes root, it's hard to pull out. One afternoon, I caught her in the garden, speaking on the phone. Her voice carried through the kitchen window, sharp and bright. "She's slipping," she said. "She wanders at night. She forgets the stove. It's only a matter of time. Daniel's too close to see it." Lies each one, but lies carefully chosen. the kind no one can easily disprove. I stepped outside, making sure the screen door slammed behind me. "I heard that," I said. Melissa turned, startled for a moment, but quickly smoothed her face into innocence. "Just talking to my sister," she said lightly. "We worry about you, Mary. That's all." "I don't need your worry," I told her. "I need your honesty." Her smile slipped for a fraction of a second. "Honesty," she repeated, as though it were a foreign word. Then she walked past me, her perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. Inside, I sat with Daniel. "She's poisoning people against me," I said. "Soon you'll hear it too, that I'm confused, that I'm dangerous to myself. That's how she'll win next time, not with law, but with whispers." He rubbed his temples, exhaustion etched deep into his face. "I'll stop her, Mom. I'll tell everyone the truth." But I shook my head. Words against words won't matter. We need proof. That night, I began writing again. I found an old notebook, its cover worn, the pages yellowed, and I started recording everything: dates, times, what I did, what I cooked, who I spoke to. Evidence of a mind still sharp, of hands still capable. Each entry was a stone in a wall I was building against her. Still, Melissa escalated. She began moving my things again, not just my chair or my slippers, but smaller, crueler things. My spectacles vanished from the table where I always left them. A pan disappeared from the kitchen shelf. Once she even hid my handbag, knowing how much I carried in it. The deed, Henry's photograph, the notebook now filling with my words. When I confronted her, she feigned surprise. "Oh, did you misplace it? You really should be more careful, Mary." But I saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. She wanted me to doubt myself. She wanted Daniel to doubt me. One evening, I heard her voice raised in their bedroom. "She's manipulating you. Don't you see? She's setting traps, making me look like the villain. This is my home too, Daniel." And then Daniel's voice, quiet but firm. "It's her home, more than it will ever be yours." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. The next morning, Melissa was gone. A suitcase was missing from the closet. Her perfume swept off the dresser. Daniel told me she had gone to her sister's again, but this time his voice carried a tremor of finality, as though he knew she might not return. For a moment I felt relief, but relief was quickly replaced by dread. Because a woman like Melissa does not leave in defeat, she regroups. And when she returns, she comes sharper, harder, determined. That night, as I sat by the window, looking out at the rose bush that stubbornly bloomed against the cold, I whispered to Henry's photograph, "She's not finished. I can feel it. The storm isn't over." And deep inside, I knew the final confrontation was coming. Not in courts, not in whispers, but in one raw, unmasked collision of truth and betrayal. And I would be ready. Melissa returned on a cold evening, her car lights sweeping across the windows like search beams. I was in the kitchen peeling apples for a pie when I heard the door slam and her voice, steady, deliberate, call Daniel's name. My knife paused mid-slice. The air felt different, heavy, as though the house itself was bracing. Daniel came down the hall, his face taut, his tie loosened from a long day at work. "Melissa," he said, his tone halfway between relief and dread. She stepped into the kitchen doorway, suitcase in hand, her eyes sharp and gleaming. "I've come to set things right," she announced, but her voice carried no warmth. She set the suitcase down like a declaration of war. I placed the knife on the counter and faced her. "You've already tried lawyers, whispers, lies. What's left?" Her smile was thin. "The truth," she said. Daniel deserves to hear it all. Tonight. Daniel rubbed his forehead. What truth, Melissa? That you've been trying to push my mother out of her home? That you lied to neighbors, to me, to the court? She shot him a glare, then turned it on me. You think you're clever, Mary, but you've trapped Daniel in chains of guilt. You've made him believe he owes you his entire life. And you, she jabbed a finger toward him, are too blind to see it. She's controlling you. Every decision you make is because of her, not because of love, not because of freedom. Her words hung in the air like poison gas. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. Guilt? No. What Daniel feels is loyalty, gratitude, qualities you'll never understand because you see family as a ladder you climb, not as roots that hold you. Daniel closed his eyes, his breath ragged. Stop, he whispered, both of you. But Melissa surged on, her voice sharp enough to cut. Do you know what people are saying, Daniel? That your mother is slipping, that she's confused, that she's dangerous to herself. They don't believe she can live alone, and neither should you. I opened my notebook, the one I'd been filling for weeks. I laid it on the counter, pages full of dates, meals, errands, conversations, evidence of a mind still sharp, of a life lived with clarity. This is my truth, I said, every day accounted for, every lie you've told disproven. Melissa's face twisted. So you keep records now, proof that you're sane? That's not strength, Mary, that's desperation. Desperation, I said evenly, is hiding a woman's slippers to make her doubt herself. It's filing papers behind your husband's back. It's trying to sell a life that isn't yours to sell. I am not desperate. I am prepared. Daniel's voice cracked. Melissa, is it true? Did you tell people my mother was losing her mind? Her silence was answer enough. She looked at him, eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and fear. I did what I had to do. For us. For us? He repeated, his voice hollow. Or for you. She faltered then, just for a breath. But pride pulled her shoulders back. If you can't see that she's poisoning everything between us, then maybe you're weaker than I thought. I felt the words land in Daniel like blows. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He looked from her to me, torn as he had been so many times before. Daniel, I said softly, look at me. He turned, his eyes glistening. You promised to care for me, yes, but I never asked you to choose me over love. I asked you to see the truth, and the truth is standing right in front of you. Melissa's voice cut in, trembling with fury. If you love me, you'll leave with me tonight. We'll start fresh, without her. Choose, Daniel, right now. The room seemed to shrink, the ticking clock louder than thunder. My son stood frozen, the weight of 2 lives pressing down on him. His silence stretched until even the air felt fragile. Finally he spoke, his voice raw. I can't leave her, Melissa. She's my mother. She's all I have left of who I am. If you love me, you'll accept that. But if you can't... He trailed off, his eyes breaking. Melissa's face crumpled, rage and disbelief colliding. So this is it, she whispered. You're choosing her. I'm choosing the truth, he said. She grabbed her suitcase, her movement sharp, violent. Then you'll regret it. Her heels cracked against the floor as she stormed out, the door slamming like a final judgment. Silence followed, deep and heavy. Daniel sank into a chair, his face in his hands. I stood at the counter, my heart pounding, tears threatening but held back. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. You did what was right, I whispered. I don't feel strong, he admitted. Strength doesn't always feel like triumph, I said. Sometimes it feels like loss. The night settled around us, thick with grief and relief tangled together. Melissa was gone, but her shadow lingered. I knew this wasn't the end, not yet, but the choice had been made. The storm had broken, and the final reckoning was close. The days after Melissa's departure felt like standing in the aftermath of a great storm. The house was the same, yet not the same. Her perfume no longer clung to the curtains. Her clipped footsteps no longer echoed down the hall, but the silence she left behind was heavy, almost reverent, like a church after a funeral. Daniel moved through the rooms slowly, as though rediscovering them. I caught him lingering by the old bookshelf Henry built, running his fingers over the grooves as if trying to anchor himself to something solid. One morning, I found him sitting in the garage on my old rocking chair, the one Melissa had exiled there. He was staring at the floor, shoulders hunched. "I don't know what comes next, Mom," he admitted when he saw me. His voice carried both relief and sorrow. "I loved her once. Maybe I still do. But I can't forgive what she tried to do to you, to us." I sat beside him, the chair creaking in protest under my weight. "Love can survive many things," I said gently, "but it cannot survive lies. You didn't lose a wife tonight, Daniel. You lost a war that never should have been fought inside a marriage." He looked at me then, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Do you ever get tired of fighting, Mom? All these battles against loneliness, against time, against people who should love you but don't?" I smiled faintly. "Every day. But tired doesn't mean defeated. It just means the fight matters." That evening, I walked through the old house, the one Melissa had tried to sell out from under me. The rose bush outside was bare now, its last bloom surrendered to the frost, but I touched its thorny branches and whispered, "Thank you for trying." Inside, the quilt of Henry's shirts waited on my bed, warm and steady. I pressed my hand against the fabric, remembering his laughter, his hammer, the way he would hum off key while fixing things. Life is strange. It takes and takes. Your youth, your strength, the people you love most, and yet it leaves behind pieces, a chair, a photograph, a rose bush, a son who still keeps his promise. Those pieces, stitched together, are what make us whole again. Daniel began to spend more time with me after Melissa left. We cooked together, simple meals, soups, casseroles, pies that filled the kitchen with cinnamon and sugar. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes he told me about work. And sometimes I told him about his father, how Henry once tried to build a birdhouse and ended up with something closer to a wooden box, how he danced in the kitchen when he thought no one was watching. Daniel laughed at those stories, a sound I hadn't heard in months, and it healed something inside me. One night as we sat with tea between us, he asked, "Do you hate her, Mom?" I thought about it for a long time. Melissa's schemes, her lies, the way she tried to erase me, the courtroom, the whispers, the papers she slid under doors. I felt the sting of it all. But then I remembered her face when Daniel chose me, the crack in her armor, the fury born out of fear. "No," I said finally. "I pity her. A woman who sees family as an obstacle will never know the strength it gives. That is punishment enough." The days stretched into weeks. The storm clouds that had darkened our lives slowly began to thin. There were still shadows. There always are. But I found myself waking with gratitude instead of dread. Gratitude for the chair Henry built, for the quilt on my bed, for the stubborn rose bush, for the son who chose truth over comfort. And now, As I sit here telling you this story, I wonder about you, the one listening. Did you hear my fight in these words? Did you feel my fear, my anger, my stubborn hope? I am an old woman, yes, but I am not a burden. I am not finished. So I ask you, if this were your mother, your grandmother, your wife, would you stand beside her? Would you keep your promise? Did you like my story? From which city are you watching?